was a hot summer day in late July. I remember the heat and the humidity of that day, but I was freezing cold. It was a month before I was supposed to go back to college for my sophomore year. I should have been excited, but I was exhausted. My mom and I had just spent the day in St. Paul, Minnesota, at an eating disorder treatment facility. When we returned home, my dad was sitting outside in our side yard on a white bucket, fixing the fence. I went up to him and told him that they had recommended inpatient treatment, but that I didn't want to do that. My dad looked down at the ground, covered his face with his hand, and choked out the words, "Kendra, I don't want you to die." Tears immediately fell from my eyes. I hadn't felt much of anything in months, but in that moment, I was overwhelmed with emotion. I felt exhausted, scared, guilty, relieved, and angry. But I finally felt like someone cared, even though the reality was people had been caring all along. A month after that day, I was admitted into inpatient treatment for anorexia. My situation wasn't unique. Eating disorders affect millions of people across the world and are among the deadliest of mental health diagnoses, having the second highest mortality rate of mental illnesses in the United States. My eating disorder developed, changed, and grew throughout my childhood and into adolescence. The thought patterns, rumination, and body image issues associated with eating disorders have been prevalent in my life for as long as I can remember. When I was 10 years old, my dad, who was a health teacher, told my mom that I had the personality of someone that could develop an eating disorder. I was a people pleaser. I set rigid standards for myself. I avoided conflict. I had low self-esteem and low self-worth, which are common personality traits seen in people with eating disorders. And then when I was 19, my eating disorder took over my life. I turned into someone that no one, including myself, recognized. I was physically, mentally, and emotionally disappearing. But that's what eating disorders do. They're all-consuming and take away your ability to live life. There's a lot of stigma, misinformation, and stereotypes associated with eating disorders that make it really hard for people to get professional help. Researchers have found that anywhere from 70 to 80% of people with eating disorders don't receive treatment. So there are several barriers to receiving help, such as limited access to treatment, inadequate resources, lack of recognition of signs and symptoms, and systemic inequities and oppression. I am privileged. I had a treatment facility in my area and insurance that would cover the cost of treatment. I am also white, female, cisgender, and my eating disorder was characterized by a restrictive diet. I am the stereotypical image of what most people think of when they think of someone with an eating disorder. Due to my identities and privilege, I was formally diagnosed and able to receive treatment. Anybody can be impacted by an eating disorder, but the intersection of your identities contributes to who is able to access treatment. Black women are diagnosed at a significantly lower rate than white women are, and have a much more difficult time accessing treatment. People who are transgender are 4 times as likely as cisgender individuals to struggle with an eating disorder. 10 million American males will suffer from an eating disorder at some point during their lives. Bulimia, binge eating, and other eating disorders are more common than anorexia, but folks are diagnosed at lower rates and are underrepresented in treatment settings. Systemic inequities and oppression play a role in eating disorder treatment and recovery, and it's important to bring that to light. I will never understand, nor will I pretend to understand to know what it's like to not be diagnosed or believe that I'm suffering. But what I can do is promote awareness, decrease stigma and shame, and educate people so others have the opportunity to heal like I did. If there are 3 things that everyone should know about eating disorders, it's this. Eating disorders are not a choice, it's not about food, and recovery is possible. So number 1, eating disorders are not a choice. In the United States, 1 person dies every 52 minutes as a direct result of an eating disorder. People can die from dehydration, malnutrition, heart attack, heart failure, and suicide. Just like any other mental health concern, people don't choose to have an eating disorder. Imagine that every time you go to eat something, you have this voice in your head telling you you're not good enough, that you're a burden to those around you, and that you deserve to feel pain. That's what it's like. My eating disorder started out as binging when I was 15 and then gradually moved into restricting, but that voice remained the same. Eating disorders help people cope with feelings of low self-esteem, worthlessness, depression, anger, anxiety, body image issues, or trauma, and the list goes on beyond that. There's no one cause of an eating disorder. They are a combination of genetic, biological, emotional, psychological, and environmental factors. But eating disorders serve a purpose in one's life. Mine served several purposes. I used it as a coping skill, a form of self-punishment, striving for perfectionism, regaining control, and acceptance. Number 2, it's not about the food. This is a good moment to address that just because somebody doesn't look like how you think someone with an eating disorder should look, doesn't mean they aren't struggling. We often think of things in extremities, black or white, but eating disorders are gray. People don't have to be a certain weight or size to be struggling with an eating disorder. It's about their relationship to food, why it's that way, and the purpose that it's serving. Now, you might think I'm contradicting myself, but I am not. I've often been asked the question, why couldn't you just eat? Or couldn't you have just stopped eating once you were full? Usually I take the time to explain why it's not that simple, but other times I've responded with, just eat or just stop eating. Wow, I never thought of that. Thank you for that great advice. Questions like these are common for people with eating disorders, and often they come from a place of misinformation and lack of understanding, but they can be harmful. Eating disorders are not about food. Food is a symptom of an eating disorder. Restricting, binging, or purging is a response to trauma, emotional or psychological concerns, and societal influences. American society can breed toxicity in how we think and feel about ourselves. We live in high-stress environments, constantly bombarded with images and messages of what it takes to be the perfect and successful person, pressure to look and act a certain way, very narrow definitions of beauty, and cultural norms that place an emphasis on physical appearance. Then you add in genetics, trauma, personality characteristics that make someone even more susceptible to developing an eating disorder. It's a lot to cope with, so you find an outlet. Similar to how people use substances or gambling to cope, I used food. The trauma I experienced as a child and young adult, societal influences, genetics, and personality characteristics combined together made me a perfect candidate for an eating disorder. Eating disorders are about coping with emotional pain, numbing feelings that are too much to handle. And even though it didn't last long, I would feel a sense of relief because even for a moment, I didn't have to acknowledge or deal with the emotional turmoil I was going through. However, that came at a price. I completely lost myself. I had no idea who I was. The eating disorder took away my authentic self, and my recovery has been focused on finding her. Number 3, recovery is possible. I began my recovery journey at 19, and I can proudly say that I've been in recovery for 8.5 years. Yes, thank you. Recovery is not a linear process. It's essentially a swirling line that ebbs and flows up and down, forward and backward for your entire life. Recovery is one of the hardest things I've ever done, and there have been times where I phoned it in. I won't lie and say that I've always wanted to be in recovery or have actively taken the steps to be in recovery because that wouldn't be true. I was pushing away reality and pretending like what was going on wasn't actually happening. And because of that, I couldn't move forward in processing and healing. I didn't go to treatment necessarily because I wanted to. I did it for other people. I did it so my family wouldn't have to go through the pain of losing me. I did it so my friends wouldn't be so worried about me. I did it so I could just get better enough. I didn't start to recover for myself, and for me, that meant I wasn't recovering. After treatment, I wasn't engaging in severe symptom use, but I had found other things like drinking, weed, sex, that gave me what the eating disorder did: numbness, so I didn't have to feel the difficult feelings. Sure, I wasn't starving myself anymore, but none of the root issues of the eating disorder were being addressed. I was stuck, and I still didn't know who I was, nor did I feel like this was my authentic self. A few years ago, I took a hard look at myself and knew that I had to make changes because not dealing with what was going on was limiting my healing. I had to admit where I was truly at, which was very early in recovery. This concept of admitting where you are at is radical acceptance. So Marshall Linehan, creator of dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, coined the term radical acceptance. It means we need to be accepting reality as it is and accepting our difficult and even painful emotions. Now, this doesn't mean approving of or liking the situation, but recognizing it for what it is. When we don't accept and deal with our emotions, it can cause suffering. Now, it's human nature to want to push away difficult feelings or fight against them or numb ourselves with unhealthy coping skills. And don't get me wrong, it can feel good and even provide some relief, but in the long term, it only hurts you more. Practicing radical acceptance means looking at situations and emotions without judgment, allowing yourself to be in the present moment and feel what you're feeling. Once I began accepting where I was at and confronting those difficult feelings of worthlessness and shame, I began to actually recover years after I left treatment. I was no longer stuck in a cycle of suffering and unhappiness. I embraced the pain instead of pushing it away. Now, this is difficult, uncomfortable, and tiring work, and I still struggle with it, but it has made all of the difference in my recovery. Along with radical acceptance, I needed to be vulnerable, which is something that is a constant area of growth for me, which a therapist once told me is how I should frame it, rather than simply saying I suck at it. But I needed to be real with myself and others. Vulnerability is a part of radical acceptance because we can accept the things we can't change and acknowledge our emotions, but then we have to work through them. And that means being vulnerable with ourselves and others. I opened myself up in ways that I never had before, and I continue to do so. Even giving this talk and sharing this part of myself is being vulnerable in a way that I haven't ever done. I've had to face my past and my experiences and really dive into some difficult periods of my life, but it contributed to my goal of being authentic. I am up here being authentic in a way that I didn't think I could do. And that's because I started to truly recover. People start to recover for many different reasons, but one of those reasons has to be for yourself. Recovery is this opportunity to discover your authentic self. And if you're not giving yourself the space to do that, you're doing yourself a disservice. Integrating radical acceptance and vulnerability is one way to help you get there. Recovery is hard, raw, and it's lifelong, but it has brought to light my true authentic self, a person I am able to be freely without shame. And that has made this journey worth it. Thank you.